Imagine ruling the largest empire on Earth, yet being defeated by your own river. The summer of 1858 descended upon London like a punishment. The heat did not simply warm the streets, it trapped the air, sealing the city inside a suffocating dome. At first, it was just an unpleasant odor drifting from the water. Then, it grew thicker, sour, rotten, violent. Within days, the smell became a living presence, creeping through windows, clinging to clothes, settling into lungs. Shopkeepers burned incense in desperation. Curtains were soaked in chemicals and hung over parliamentary windows. Members of Parliament pressed scented handkerchiefs to their faces. But even the grand halls beside the river could not escape it. The mighty capital of the British Empire was gagging. Outside, horses stumbled through shimmering streets, while the great river beside them moved slowly, dark and swollen with decay. The once proud Thames had turned into a boiling artery of waste under the blazing sun. People whispered that breathing felt like swallowing death itself. Businesses halted. Social life froze. Fear spread across rich and poor alike. This was not an invasion, not a revolution, not a war. Yet it brought the empire's heart to a standstill. In that unbearable summer, London faced an enemy it had created with its own hands. This was the year the city could not breathe. The catastrophe had been building for decades. London's population had exploded during the Industrial Revolution, transforming it into the world's most powerful commercial hub. Factories multiplied, railways expanded, and thousands flooded into the city seeking opportunity. But beneath the progress lay neglect. Sanitation systems had barely evolved since medieval times. Most homes relied on cesspits, which frequently overflowed. When they did, waste was simply flushed into drains that led directly to the Thames. Industrial chemicals, slaughterhouse remains, and raw sewage merged into a toxic current. The river that once symbolized imperial strength slowly became an open sewer. Authorities knew conditions were worsening, yet political hesitation and financial arguments delayed meaningful reform. Smaller outbreaks of cholera had already claimed thousands of lives earlier in the decade, terrifying the population. Although physician John Snow had begun challenging prevailing theories about disease, many leaders still believed poisonous air, miasma, was the main threat. Ironically, in 1858, that poisonous air felt undeniably real. As temperatures soared, water levels dropped, exposing thick layers of black sludge along the riverbanks. The sun baked the waste, releasing gases so foul that even lifelong residents were shocked. What had been tolerated for years suddenly became unbearable. The crisis was no longer hidden beneath the surface. It rose visibly and violently into the air. The epicenter of humiliation stood beside the river itself, the Palace of Westminster. Lawmakers attempting to conduct business found it nearly impossible to remain inside the chamber. Reports described curtains soaked in chloride of lime hung over windows in a desperate attempt to neutralize the odor. Some sessions were shortened, Others were postponed. Newspapers mocked the situation, highlighting the irony that the most powerful government in the world could not control the smell outside its own doors. Panic spread through the population, as rumors linked the stench to deadly epidemics. Though modern science would later confirm cholera spread through contaminated water rather than air, fear does not wait for evidence. Citizens believed the air itself was lethal. Wealthier families fled to the countryside. The poor had no escape. Markets emptied early. River traffic slowed. Even the monarchy could not ignore the scale of the embarrassment. The Great Stink became more than a public health emergency. It became a national disgrace. The empire that dominated continents was being mocked for drowning in its own waste. The crisis forced politicians to confront a truth they had postponed for years. Infrastructure was not a luxury. It was survival. Out of disaster emerged determination. An engineer named Joseph Bazalgette was entrusted with an ambitious and unprecedented mission: redesign London's entire sewer system. His vision was bold: construct massive underground tunnels running parallel to the Thames, intercepting waste before it could enter the river. It was a project of staggering scale. Thousands of workers labored beneath the streets, laying hundreds of miles of brick-lined sewers. The engineering calculations were deliberately oversized, built to handle future population growth. A decision that would prove visionary. Construction began swiftly after Parliament approved emergency funding, driven by the memory of that unbearable summer. The work reshaped the city permanently. Embankments were built along the Thames, reclaiming land and modernizing its appearance. Slowly, the river began to recover. The air improved. Disease outbreaks declined. What had once symbolized decay gradually returned to being a source of pride. The Great Stink became a turning point in urban planning worldwide, demonstrating that modern cities required modern sanitation. London's suffering became a lesson for the industrial world. The smell that once paralyzed an empire ultimately forced it to innovate. From suffocation came transformation, proof that sometimes collapse is the beginning of progress.